Call this meeting to order. Good morning. Good morning. Welcome to PSTA. Good morning. Commissioner Eggers, could you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. I appreciate everybody coming out today. We have an opportunity for public comment. If you'd like to speak on an issue that's on the agenda, please wait for that agenda, but please fill out a green card first and give it to the clerk. This is our opportunity for public comment on the consent agenda items or any other topic. And we have one person who'd like to speak, Robert Sander.
I guess up here?
Yeah.
Okay. As you can see, I'm one of your drivers, and I'm here a little over 3 years. I'm from New York City originally, and I haven't driven up there, but I did paratransit, and that's why I'm here at PSTA. I'm not going to waste your time. I'm not going to waste my time. We have a government shutdown, and it's the longest in the history of this country. There's a lot of people who are working without a paycheck, and in a couple days, they're going to go without a paycheck, and they're going to make some very hard decisions. Those decisions are whether or not they're going to put gas in their car, pay their insurance, get to work. And that's where we come in. Because, as you already know, we have a monopoly on Pinellas County. We have something Hart doesn't have. We have 3 ways to get into Hillsborough County. Therefore, we have an opportunity nobody else has in the region, and we can help hundreds of families right now with transportation to and from Hillsborough County into Pinellas. A lot of these people keep us safe, and this is our opportunity to rise up and keep them working, get them to where they need to go. I don't have to tell you that throughout the course of this shutdown, you have heard people donating to food banks, local charities, Salvation Army, Goodwill, and others. But if you look right here, right now, at the news going on, nobody is addressing their transportation needs, whatever those needs are. And like I said, in a couple of days, they won't be able to pay their insurance on their cars. At PSTA, we can do something more than providing for food banks or clothing or money. We can give these people peace of mind. We can give them a sense of security, a sense of confidence, and more importantly, hope that tomorrow and the next day they can get to work. Because each and every one of you board members can look me in the eye and you can tell me that we are cheaper than Uber. And this is where we come in. Maybe we can get the media involved and get a press conference. Maybe we can give free rides if they show us their cards. But instead of free rides, let them know that in their own neighborhoods, they can go to AMSCOT or CVS and pick up one of our cards. These are decisions they are making right now as we are meeting. We have an opportunity. Thank you.
Thank you. Good ideas. We can talk about that later. I'll do it. Okay. All right. Do we have anybody else who would like to speak under public comment? Yes, ma'am. Okay, we have one more. Okay, we have another one. Carl Heisenblatt, but I'm sorry, I'm messing up your name. Carl? Yes. Morning.
First, I'd like to thank the board members, especially Brad Miller and Ms. Long, and the people that were present on the legislative meeting that I attended. I learned a lot about PSTA and how they seek out funds from Tallahassee and Washington. Okay, I want to address the bathroom issue up at Park Street because the bathrooms have not been open during service hours from 5 a.m. to 11:35 at night, whatever time the last buses run. This is a major problem, especially since I have diabetes. I'm very, I'm having issues with my health. So I'd like to see the bathrooms be opened from operating hours. At night, you have a security guard there. The other day, there was no toilet paper there for over probably a 12 or 16-hour period. That wasn't delivered by facilities maintenance. Secondly, I'd like to see the PSTA maybe instead of hiring outside contractors to do security or cleaning the bathrooms, to put people in place that could have a job. Because before you used to have a person that worked at Pinellas Park at Shops at Park Place who was hired on by PSTA doing the cleaning of the bathrooms down there and the maintenance. Now, why can't that happen at Clearwater, or back at Pinellas Park, or back in St. Pete? You hire outside contractors. I'm sure you're paying a premium price to have an outside contractor. Maybe they don't have benefits with you guys, but you're probably paying close to double or 3 times what you would pay to have an employee employed by you guys. Thirdly, safety. Being a diabetic, type 2, my A1C has been 7.5. I'm diagnosed over a month ago, actually 2 months ago now. I have trouble walking. I have peripheral edema. I've been told by bus drivers to get out the back when it's easier for me to get out the front where they can load the bus much better. I also have been had a bus not pull up to the curb at stop number 3660. I have a unique gift. It's called a memory, a very unique one. I can see or hear a number one time and memorize it. I have probably over 30 or 40, 50 bus stops memorized, and I can remember the dates and times that I've been treated poorly by a bus driver. Stop number 3660. I was probably waiting around 6 o'clock at night, or a little bit before that, maybe a little bit later. It arrived at 118th Avenue at right around 7 p.m., so I probably got in after 6 o'clock, because it's only like a 5-10 minute drive down the road. The bus driver pulled up to the stop and left probably about 1.5 or 2 feet away from the curbside where you'll have to actually physically pull myself on the bus now. My feet are swollen and I have peripheral edema. My legs are swollen twice the size of my left foot. The bus driver said, I know, wrap it up. The bus driver told me he did not have to pull up to the curb. He left room between the road where a car or bike could come by and hit me, and said, I don't have to pull up to the curb. Also, I've saved one of your bus drivers from hitting a car last week. You know, if it wasn't for me standing at the front of the bus with my eyes, he would have hit a car. But I said, watch out. And he actually avoided hitting that car. A while ago, I had a bike running upside of the bus where the bus driver was making a right-hand turn into Park Street when I was sitting in the middle of the bus, and that bus driver would have hit that bicyclist because he couldn't see him, it was dark out. So I warned him about that. He would have hit that bike.
I'm sorry, your time is up.
Okay, but I just want to mention that to the board. You know, these are safety issues, and I'm disabled right now. All right, thank you for your time.
Thank you. Good morning, everyone, and I do apologize for my tardiness. I actually could not get down the road this morning from the construction. We have...
I think these are for later.
Those are done.
Oh,
Or
okay.
they're done.
Yes, those are done.
Okay. Is that it for public comment? No one else would like to speak? Okay, then. Brad, would you like to recognize our two PSTA board members? One represents the city of Dunedin, the Vice Mayor Heather Gracie, and I don't see her. She'll be here next month, I understand. We're also happy to have, oh my goodness, I'm sorry. So, let me just take a breath here. This is what happens when I get really frustrated. Oh, my goodness. I'm so happy to welcome our newest board member from the city of St. Petersburg, Gina Driscoll. Welcome, Gina, and I promise I'm not always... This is her first PSTA board meeting. I apologize for the impression that you might have of us so far. I promise you it's going to get a lot better. So I'd like to welcome both Heather, who isn't here today, and Gina, and we look forward to working with you very much. This is a big board and a lot of moving parts, and so I hope you'll be very engaged because it's very important to our community. Now, with these new members, we also have to say goodbye to our departing PSTA board member, Lisa Wheeler-Brown, and I don't see her here. Oh, wait, there you are. Please come forward, Lisa.
Good morning. So, Councilwoman Lisa Wheeler-Bowman has served on PSTA for the last little bit more than 2 years and ties the record for the most number of videos that she has thankfully been willing to volunteer to be in and being a star in her time here. So she is a movie star. In addition, she has served on a number of PSTA committees during her time here, and she and a few of us had a very memorable time in Washington, D.C., trying out Ethiopian food. She has served a very important part of St. Petersburg for PSTA because many of, we have very strong ridership in the district that she represents. When she came with me once to pass out some information at Grand Central, she was like a celebrity. It seemed like there was maybe 35 people that walked up and got a picture with her and knew her. So thank you very much for your service. I know you'll still be a very strong supporter on the St. Pete City Council. Would you like to say anything?
Not really, but I just want to say thank you. It was a very great experience for me. I'm going to miss my two partners over there, Shulman and Egger. So, but I'm going to miss everybody. I hope to see you all, and I enjoyed it. And Gina is going to be great. And thank you. And Miss Patty, always. All right.
Thank you.
Go. Okay. All right, next it is my honor to recognize PSTA's Bus Driver of the Year, Mr. Tab Ward. PSTA's Transportation Director, Jeff Thompson, is going to introduce him to us. Welcome. Driver of the Year. Wow, you must have a lot of patience.
Good morning, Board of Directors. Jeff Thompson, Director of Transportation. It's my pleasure, and I'm very happy to be here before you this morning to introduce Mr. Tab Ward to you. When I was talking to Tab about coming before you this morning, the first thing I asked him is your name short for something, Tab? And he said to me, no. The first thing that he revealed was that he was named after Tab Hunter, who was a 1950s film producer, author, and singer. Some of you may remember that, right, Joe? So, all right. Tab was supposed to be named Robin because Tab's parents thought he was going to be a girl. I remember they didn't have ultrasound and all that back then when we were born, so we had to take a chance. But they had not picked a boy's name, so they called him Tab, after Tab Hunter. Tab was born and raised in Clearwater, Florida. He attended Clearwater High School, graduated in class of 1977, and he still resides in Clearwater. Tab is married to his wife, Tina, for 33 years, and he met her working at the Sunshine Mall Theater. I guess she was selling tickets and he was taking them, so it worked out well. They have 3 daughters, Gabrielle, Madison, and Sophia. Tab also is 3 years of active Army service with 4 years in the military police and the active reserve. As far as his career at PSTA, he's been serving customers around Pinellas County for 29 years, so he does have a lot of patience. Currently, he operates our Protector, and the Protector responds at a moment's notice to service interruptions, which is a vital role to the success of our service. He's operated the Suncoast Beach Trolley for about 10 years prior, and he knows all of our routes, so he's well qualified to protect the service. Tab likes to watch rugby. He's a big Tampa Bay Lightning fan, and he's been going to the Gator Nationals drag racing event for many years. It's a privilege to have Tab Ward representing PSTA as our Driver of the Year, and he's logged over 1 million miles behind the wheel, driving people safely around the area. So it's my pleasure to introduce the PSTA Driver of the Year, Tab Ward.
All right, moving on to our committee updates. Mark O'Hara, would you like to give us our Transit Riders Advisory Committee report? Good morning.
Good morning. Good morning, Chairman Long, Mr. Miller, and esteemed board members. The Transit Riders Advisory Committee met on January 15th, and there are 3 items I would like to highlight for you. The first action item was the Advantage Pinellas presentation, which you will hear about later this morning. Staff is recommending possible service cuts to alleviate the budget deficit. Members of the Transit Riders Advisory Committee did express their concerns over possible service cuts, but are determined to work with PSTA to avoid a decrease or elimination of routes in paratransit. The TRAC unanimously approved staff to begin holding public hearings on possible service cuts if necessary. Our second action item, which you also see today, was a staff recommendation to send a letter of support to the Florida Department of Transportation regarding the need for construction improvements at the State Road 60 I-275 interchange in Hillsborough. Currently, there is a bottleneck of traffic which backs up and has a negative impact on Pinellas County commuters. TRAC unanimously approves sending the letter of support to FDOT. Finally, members brainstormed what our initiatives would be for 2019. A majority of our focus will be on promoting current and future routes, such as the addition of LX service and the Central Avenue BRT, as well as advancing the concept of car-free living, especially in St. Petersburg. We all agreed to continue the Track Star Award program as well. One last thing, our next track meeting will be held on February 19th, and board members are always welcome to attend. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, I will give the Forward Pinellas report unless our chair, where did he go? Go ahead. Okay. So, the Forward Pinellas report. The most exciting thing that I want to share with all of you is that we had a very successful, robust, and thoughtful meeting last Friday at the campus of the St. Pete College in Seminole. And all of the folks that are really enmeshed in the transportation solutions arena and the different agencies were represented there. So it was a lengthy meeting. We talked about every possible potential funding mechanism that we could use to really beef up our transit solutions for not only Pinellas County, but for the region. And our very own Debbie Leos gave a great presentation on the lack of funding to really increase the service for PSTA. That was very insightful. And the county also talked about our Transportation Trust Fund, which is steadily going down instead of up. And so there's a lot of work to be done and a lot of decisions that have to be made. We talked about raising the gas tax, for example. We talked about a sales tax referendum. And one of the things that we're watching very closely is the actions of Tallahassee right now, who continue their philosophy of trying to put hamstrings around local government. And so I venture to say that we'll be having some very difficult decisions going forward. The county has a strategic planning session coming up here in another week or so, and we're going to have a nice discussion about the opportunity to use some of our bed tax dollars for transportation solutions to get people from the airport over to Pinellas County. And none of these decisions are easy to make because there's a lot of competing interest that try to peel the dollars away. So we're going to have to get very focused and very real about how we move forward if we want to be successful, which all encompasses the quality of life for Pinellas County, and more importantly, for those of us that have to cross the bridges, it's really a public health and safety issue if you think it through very carefully, because we're an island on a peninsula, and in the event of an encroaching storm or unforeseen hazard, we have to be able to get off this island. So doing things to ensure that we're able to move our citizens around is going to be more and more critical as time goes forward. David, would you like to add anything to what I've just said?
Yeah, just real quickly, first of all, there is a north end of the county that does connect us to the rest of the land, so we are a peninsula, on a peninsula. Just kidding with you. Anyway, you see my humor just is not very good. The only thing I would add to that is that in the conversations that we're hearing about, we're talking about getting money for different transportation and transit issues that we've just been recently told from Tallahassee that I guess because of the storm last year that ravaged the peninsula, there I go, Pensacola area, that there's going to be less money. So some of our projects are being pushed out a year, perhaps even two. So we're still kind of hearing more and more about that. We'll learn more in the next month or so. But I suspect that in the next 2 months while they're up in session, there'll be some other adjustments. So it's even going to be tougher to get some of that money down here. But in any event, your summary was spot on as far as the revenue conference that we had. There's a lot of work to do, a lot of conversation.
A lot of work.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And just two more things that I want to highlight for you as it relates to Forward Pinellas. We did approve the Florida Department of Transportation draft tentative work program, which is a 5-year budget for funding transportation projects right here in Pinellas County, and with comments mainly about the planned improvements to the US 19 interchange at Gandy Boulevard. So if you haven't driven through the Gandy Boulevard exchange recently, you'll probably get lost, because every time I do it, they've changed the road again, and it can be challenging to figure out which way you need to be going. We also had 2 new board members that were added to Forward Pinellas. Commissioner Karen Seal is back on the board, and Council Member David Albritton from Clearwater, and Bel Air Bluffs Commissioner Susie Sofer, and Tarpon Springs Commissioner Jacob Carr. We're all new members on Forward Pinellas, so they have a steep learning curve, and it'll be fun to watch them grow. All right, and I'll move right into the T-BARTA report. Of course, we are coming off of the holidays, and we have our first board meeting this coming Friday up in Hernando County. It's very early in the morning, so we'll be starting off pretty early that day. And we're going to be approving the audit committee's report and also having a discussion with the entire board about our federal public advocacy group that we have to retain for T-BARTA. David Green, the new executive director, has been doing a yeoman's job moving the agency forward. He's up in Tallahassee as we speak, meeting with our elected officials and trying to ensure that we are able to bring transportation dollars back down to Tampa Bay. So that's my report for T-BARTA this month. Stay tuned. It's going to be an exciting year. So now may I have a motion for the consent agenda, please?
Move.
Thank you. And may I have the voting card, please? For everyone to cast their votes? She's working on it. Here we go. Everybody, please cast your votes. And the item has passed unanimously. Yeah. All right, so next we have a very exciting initiative that the PSTA Executive Committee has reviewed, and we are recommending to you today for approval. As most of you are already aware, I hope, I have been working on this Tampa Bay Regional Resiliency Compact for the past year as chair of the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. And I'm very proud to say that, why are you looking at me like that?
We missed item 6A.
Yeah,
Okay,
6A.
I'll come back to it, don't worry, no worries. Don't panic, we're good. Okay. So, back to the Resiliency Compact, I'm very proud to share with you that in October, we had 27 regional governments that signed on to this compact. And as an initiative moving forward this year, we're very anxious to ensure that the business community comes to the table on that issue, because if you've been following the news lately about the issue of climate change and sea level rise, you know the cost of doing nothing is staggering. Imagine if we had a Hurricane Michael that came through Tampa Bay. So with that said, I'd like to introduce the executive director of the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council to tell you more about this important initiative that PSTA hopefully is going to be able to join. Sean, would you please like to come up to the podium? Thank you.
Thank you. Good morning. I'm Sean Sullivan with the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. We have one of 10 RPCs in the state of Florida. We are also the original. We began our 57th year earlier this month. So I'm here today to talk to you about an initiative that the council has been working on under Chair Long's leadership. And we know that PSTA is the largest public transit provider in Pinellas County, most densely populated county in the state of Florida. That you have 210 vehicles in your transit fleet, 24 of which are hybrid vehicles, 4 current vehicles that are electric, and that in August of 2018, you were awarded a $1 million grant from the Federal Transit Administration under their low and no emissions program, which will allow you to buy 2 additional electric vehicles, bringing your fleet of all electric to 6 vehicles in your fleet. So in my opinion, and as an advocate and former FTA employee, I might add, I applaud you for your work, and you're ahead of the curve in resilience and reducing a carbon footprint, in my opinion. So if I could move the clicker. So I'd like to give you a brief overview today to tell you about a specific transportation grant that we're working on, funded by the Federal Highway Administration with Pinellas, Pasco, and Hillsborough counties, and then to talk about briefly about the Regional Resilience Coalition that we're currently working on. So the Tampa Bay RPC, we serve 6 counties, from Citrus in the north to Manatee in the south. We include 21 municipalities, and we have 13 gubernatorial appointees that serve on our board, and we have 3 ex officios with FDOT, SWIFT-MUD, and DEP. If my math is correct, that means we have 40 voting members on our board, which is the largest board I've worked for in 30 years. We have really been leading the way in resiliency planning as an RPC since 1985. This list contains a list of projects that we have worked on and currently working on. We kind of think that we've helped to set the standard not only in the region, but really throughout the state of Florida in terms of resiliency planning. And as the chair alluded to a moment ago, back in 2016, our director of research conducted a report, an analysis, the cost of doing nothing. It anticipates a 3-foot rise in sea level by 2060. And if nothing is done between now and then, and that 3-foot estimate is factual, then we would, potential would be a $400 billion worth of property in the region would be at risk by the end of the century. Resiliency is interconnected and interdependent, and by that we talk about transportation systems, really the reason we're here today, infrastructure and water management, critical habitat and aquatic systems, communities and economies, and we all know that we have shared vulnerabilities. This is a chart produced by NOAA, which is a scenario, potentially 2017 relative sea level rise scenarios for St. Petersburg. And you can see by that chart, sea level rise, should it occur, and we expect that it will by the year 2100, certainly, and all of those in the interim, that we are clearly living in a vulnerable area. So specifically about a project that we are partnering with the 3 core counties, funded by the Highway Administration, Federal Highway Administration. It's a 2-year pilot program. There were 11 such projects awarded throughout the country by FHWA, and we're pleased to be a partner in this particular grant that looks at integrating resilience into agency practices, tools, resources, deployment, and monitoring. And that is a logo, and those are our partners in this program. So I'm going to skip this slide and jump to the next one. The FHWA project purpose is to address FAST Act requirements for MPO long-range transportation planning, to consider projects and strategies to improve resilience and reliability of transportation systems, and including stormwater mitigation. We consult with federal agencies and agency partners responsible for natural disaster risk reduction. And then we focus, one of the primary highlights of this grant is to focus on inland flooding, to include storm surge and sea level rise. Now specifically about the Tampa Bay Regional Resiliency Coalition that we formed under Commissioner Long's leadership back in January of 2018. 10 months later, after Commissioner Long brought the issue to the executive board at the RPC, we had 25 governments agree, and early October have signed. We worked with partners throughout the summer to encourage each legislative board for each individual county and/or community to vote to sign a memorandum of understanding. 2 days after our event, we had 2 additional governments vote to join, so now we're up to 27, and I've gotten 2 calls just this week for folks interested in potentially joining. So the list is ever growing, and we're very enthusiastic. So the member governments, and not only member governments, but governments throughout the region really are going to be, we've asked them to sign the MOU. And again, as I mentioned, that effort is ongoing. Now, partners, this is where we would suggest the PSTA would come in, that we have public and private sector entities that oversee or manage critical systems, clearly something this board does, that can provide data, information, educational, technical, and policy expertise, and to engage stakeholders throughout the region. And we believe that the PSTA could be a valuable partner in that effort. This is the structure of the coalition. Of course, it's guided by our elected and gubernatorial appointed officials, a steering committee chaired by Commissioner Long. Planning Advisory Committee is being worked out now, and we're beginning to establish work groups. And I might add, within the last 2 weeks, we hired a full-time position, which is the Director of Resilience and Engagement at the RPC. The Planning Advisory Committee that I alluded to in the last slide, this is essentially the folks that we believe that would help us, be able to help us. And this is the metric that we've come up with, coordinated by our new Director of Resilience and Engagement, C.J. Reynolds. Now, the desired initial work products, folks might say, well, okay, we form a resiliency coalition, we agree to help, what is it that you're going to do? And that's really where we are now in year 2 of the initiative. And some desired initial work products are a unified sea level rise projection for the Tampa Bay region. Would also like to conduct an analysis of the vulnerability of the Tampa Bay region to sea level rise. And we know specifically that Pinellas County is undergoing such an analysis pretty much as we speak. And then would like to also develop a Tampa Bay Regional Resiliency Action Plan that all governments that have signed on and partners could use as a resource moving forward. So the Regional Resiliency Action Plan has many components. I won't necessarily read them all, but I'd like you to take a look at them briefly. All of these elements, we believe, are pertinent to resiliency, and we would ask for your help as we move forward. And then specifically with PSTA, we would ask that you review and consider signing a letter of collaboration. Now, the letter of collaboration is not complete yet. We're working on developing that with our attorney, but I can commit to have that to Brad within a week. We wouldn't expect to show up today and hand you something and ask you to vote to sign it, but we would ask you to consider that perhaps at a future meeting. You would be the lead and the first public transit agency in the region to do so, should you choose to do so. We would also ask that PSTA consider assigning a staff person that can participate in coalition planning, serve on our advisory committee and work group, and we promise not to overwhelm you with additional meetings. We know Brad and his staff are busy folks, and we respect that. Our next meeting is scheduled for February 11th, after our regular board meeting, and then the Planning Advisory Committee meeting will be held on February 12th. So we're very excited about this initiative. It's the 18th such initiative in the United States, so we're very proud of where we've come under Commissioner Long's leadership for the last year. Thank you, Commissioner. And we're looking forward to the future, and we really would appreciate your consideration of signing the letter of collaboration and your participation in what I consider a very exciting initiative. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Sean. Questions or thoughts from the members of the board? Anybody? Commissioner Rice.
Thank you. Well, I want to certainly acknowledge and thank our chair, Commissioner Long, for her leadership on resiliency issues at the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council level. It seems like the focus on resiliency, and that's resiliency in terms of stronger storms, sea level rise. It just really seems to me to be bringing a whole new relevance to the Tampa Bay Regional Planning Council. And the RPC, it's been environmental issues in the past that have really taken root under the RPC. It was, I think, back in the 70s that the Agency on Bay Management was created, and from that was created the Tampa Bay Estuary Program, which was eventually recognized by Congress as one of our nation's estuaries. And all of that happened under the umbrella of the Regional Planning Council. And love to see us eventually get started, not started, but get to a point where we're taking this up on a regional level, just like our counterparts in South Florida. But I'm a little jealous because when I was my years on the Regional Planning Council, we weren't working on this. And I'm just really just blown away and so impressed that this was taken up under your leadership. So thank you, Janet.
Oh my goodness, thank you so much, Darden. And there was one really important fact that I forgot to share and Sean didn't either. But you may know that the World Climate Accord that was held this year in Poland, next year it was supposed to go to Brazil. Brazil pulled out of their commitment. Now, I don't know why they pulled out, but as soon as they did, we sent a letter off to the United Nations inviting them to have the next World Climate Accord in Tampa Bay. And it was signed onto by our congressional delegation at the federal level. And imagine my surprise when right away we got a letter back from the UN sharing with us how proud and pleased they were at the work that we were doing in Tampa Bay, but there was a section in their bylaws that forbid them for letting any country that isn't part of the Climate Accord host one of their world events. And I was so upset over that because beyond the issue of the sea level rise and climate change, imagine what that could have done for Tampa Bay just economically, bringing that many people from around the world to our beautiful area. And it isn't lost on me, I hope it won't be lost on you, that the United Nations 2 months ago, 3 months ago now, issued their report that said that Tampa Bay was the most vulnerable spot in the entire country to climate change and sea level rise. And following right up behind that was a report issued by the Trump administration acknowledging the same thing. So we are front and center, and you don't have to be a scientist to realize that the rainstorms are more frequent, and when they come, they're a lot heavier than they ever have been before, as are the winds, and as we saw when Hurricane Irma decided to pay us a visit. We didn't even have a direct hit, but oh my goodness, the damage that it caused, not only in Tampa Bay, but the entire state, was overwhelming, and we're still waiting for our reimbursement check from FEMA to pay us back for all of the extra dollars that we had to appropriate for the cleanup. So stay tuned, because this is a very big, large, serious issue going forward. And I'd like to hear some comments from the rest of the board, because it's such a big, important issue. No one has anything? Yes. Commissioner Albritton.
I can tell you, Clearwater's on board. We just had a meeting at our last meeting, talked about that, and made a resolution. And then we're in talks now to put on board a resiliency and sustainability person to oversee some of the projects that we have. So it's a good thing. Everybody's talking about it.
Excellent. With all those big, huge structures and resorts you have on the beach, it's really important to you, for sure. Anyone else? Yes. There you go.
Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
The last night Tarpon Springs did the same thing. We authorized the city manager to bring forward a first reading for an for an environmental sustainability board. That would be comprised of citizens and advise the city commission on various issues with the environment, and with Tarpon Springs having the most coastline of any city in Pinellas County. I think it's very important. If you're an environmentalist or you're not, it's just a matter of fact. And I think cities and counties are getting on board more and more. So Tarpon Springs will be there soon. So thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Commissioner Rice?
Yeah, I just, it seemed relevant to chime in that we're very proud of St. Pete's efforts as well. And a couple of weeks ago, we were able to announce that we received the Bloomberg American Cities Climate Challenge Award, which is the equivalent of $2.5 million in staff and resources. So the two big things we're going to be tackling will be 2-year accelerated programs addressing the energy efficiency of our buildings, and the other part of it is green fleets and addressing the transportation sector. So,
Excellent. And we're very jealous of that award, by the way.
well, it was like the third or fourth bite at the apple, so that's.
I know you worked hard on it.
We did.
Thank you very much. Yes, Commissioner Eggers?
Yeah, and when the folks from South Florida came up to talk to us, I was really impressed with the effort that they had made down there and the leadership from the, I don't remember the doctor's name from Fort Lauderdale. She was very impressive. Do you know what they're doing as far as setting aside, as part of this planning process, setting aside capital for addressing those kinds of resiliency efforts that are going to be made down the road?
Actually, I do. That is one of their biggest issues that they're working on, and it was interesting to listen to them, all the different local governments in South Florida, Miami Beach, and Dade, because unlike here, they don't work together. You know, they don't have a mayor's council, for example. They don't have a big C where all the communities come together to talk through their programs. And so they compete with each other instead of working together and pooling their resources. And so that's a great question, and it's a big issue that they are trying to resolve down there as well. So they were very interested in what we were doing and how we had been able to work together to put this climate compact in place, because they have been trying to do it for 10 years, and we're much further along in the year that we worked on it than they have been, because, again, they work in silos. So,
well, I just wanted to also echo the comments that Councilmember Rice made about your leadership, and thank you for that, and thank you for trying to get the business community on board, because I really think where government and business kind of work hand in hand, it brings more credibility to for our residents, and it brings a lot more synergistic effort. So thank you for that effort.
you're welcome, and thank you very much. Obviously, I am able to put my act together on other areas, unlike this morning here. Anybody else? Brad, did you want, I saw you, yeah, go ahead.
Well, thank you very much, and certainly thanks to Chair Long for introducing this item for PSTA to get involved with it. I was very thankful to join her in Miami to meet the folks and attend the South Florida Regional Compact, which has been around for 10 years, and they were very impressed that a transportation element was being considered in the Tampa Bay, because they hadn't really done that so far down there. As Commissioner Long said, they really were more reporting on what each individual jurisdiction was sort of doing. And some of those, some of the capital projects that they were doing in South Florida, say Broward County would build certain seawalls, and that would send all of the water downstream to the neighboring community, and they were just alerting the mayor that they were going to be flooded out. That's what we're certainly hoping not to model off. But I really want to thank Sean too about getting PSTA involved and recognizing, there's been study after study done that the number one most influential thing that any one of us, any individual can do to help reduce their carbon footprint is not drive their car. There's really nothing else that we can do on a daily basis that can really have an impact, but not driving your car and taking the bus, even one of PSTA's older buses that's not electric, helps improve the environment and helps reduce your carbon footprint and our whole carbon footprint in Pinellas County. So I want to take advantage of this new compact that everybody is joining and signing on to highlight that, to highlight the impact that transportation decisions that we make are a key component to how we move forward and make a more resilient future for ourselves. So thank you very much for Sean and getting involved with this federal highway program. I think it'll just highlight the importance of public transit in our community in this way.
All right, anyone else? Gina?
Thank you.
You're welcome.
I just wanted to add on to what my colleague, Councilmember Rice, mentioned earlier regarding the Bloomberg American Cities Climate Challenge. It's a really exciting opportunity for us, but I hope that we all see it as a great opportunity for the region, because the $2.5 million in resources that are going to be allocated by Bloomberg Philanthropies for this effort, for this project, is something that I think we can all share. We'll learn a lot. A lot of great work is going to be done, and it's going to benefit everyone. I've done a great deal of research over the last year or so on sea level rise. It's something that's become kind of a fascination for me, because it's so alarming, and yet there are things that we can do. And I do have a new business item that is waiting in committee for discussion on a citywide approach. What can we do about it? We've seen the research, we've seen the reports. It's time to put a plan together. And so as I work with city staff on that, I'll be looking to this coalition for ways that we can all work together on that. So I'm incredibly pleased with the bold action that the coalition is ready to take, because we are too. Last week, I also wanted to mention that to strengthen our city's approach to climate change and making our city stronger in that respect, I have asked in our budget workshop for next fiscal year to add 2 additional resiliency and sustainability positions. One to add on to the Office of Sustainability and Resiliency, and another position specifically for Public Works to deal with that. It's a position that had existed before that had been eliminated, and I have asked for that to be recreated so that we can be stronger as a city as we face these issues. So I just wanted to add on to that, and thank you, Commissioner Long, for all of the work that you're doing on this issue.
Well, thank you very much. It's really a big deal. So I know we have a couple of public comment cards.
Those were for the general public comment.
Oh.
Those are for 6A.
Okay, well.
I don't think we have any for 6B.
Okay.
Are we on 6A?
Yes,
No,
we are.
we haven't voted on 6B yet.
I thought we did, I'm sorry.
I didn't.
Okay, so we don't have any public comment
On
cards on
6B,
6B.
correct.
Okay, so then,
Yes.
if we're ready to ask for a motion to approve 6B.
So moved.
Okay,
Second.
thank you. So could we have the voting card, please? Okay. Now, we are going to go back to 6A, which is the PSTA Innovative Services Contracts Insurance Modifications. Brad?
Thank you. So this is an action item this month that follows up on an action item that the board approved last month. Last month, PSTA took an action to approve a number of different contracts that are used to provide services under our, what we call our innovative services. Our first in the nation, first mile, last mile programs called Direct Connect, our TD Late Shift, our new Sandbox program for our paratransit program, and then starting just a month ago, our new Tarpon Springs Healthy Hop, which is getting rave reviews by the riders who are using it. To provide those services, to our residents, PSTA employs a lot of different contractors. Uber, Lyft, United Taxi, Wheelchair Transport, Care Ride, Liberty Wheelchair. And the way we set up those programs is that we publicize the availability that we will provide the services, and then anyone can join on to providing the service if they're willing to agree to our our contract. The contracts that the board approved last month, we found out after the meeting that a couple of the providers, United Taxi and Wheelchair Transport and Liberty Wheelchair, were not able to meet the insurance requirements that we had included in those contracts. So over the last month, we have investigated the possibility about what is the appropriate level of insurance coverage to require these contractors to provide. And I want to thank and recognize our Director of Risk Management, Diane Randall, who's here, who did a lot of this analysis. These contracts are for transportation services, through Uber, Lyft, a taxi, or a wheelchair van. But since there are so many contractors, the number of vehicles and the number of trips per contractor are very small. Unlike our contract, say, with Jolly Trolley or with DART, where there are thousands of rides every single day, most of these individual contracts may only provide a dozen or 24 rides a day. So they are quite a bit different. As you see in the write-up, we have taken a look at the insurance requirements and are recommending modifying the levels of insurance required first for United Taxi, since they're a taxi cab provider, to the levels listed in your item. And then for Wheelchair Transport and Liberty Wheelchair, a total coverage of $500,000. So this is less than we have in some of our other contracts, but again, the number of vehicles and the total liability, certainly because of the fewer number of trips for these services, is substantially less. And our risk management group has assessed that this is an appropriate level of insurance to provide. Nick Cambus, who is the owner of United Taxi, is here, and I want to thank him for coming. He can help answer any other questions. The Finance Committee had a good discussion about this. They are recommending this for approval, but they asked that it be raised here again, just in case any other board members would have any question.
Any questions, board members? Commissioner Barkley.
Yes, the Finance Committee did meet on the Innovative Services contract with regard to Direct Connect, TD Shift, Late Shift, Mobility on Demand, and Healthy Hop. And what we found out from talking with our insurance expert, Diane Randall, is that PSTA's providers can meet the typical insurance requirements of the contracts, and that's largely because of the cost associated with this. The the Finance Committee did vote 3-2 to pass this. I was one of the negative votes in that I feel uncomfortable with PSTA assuming a greater amount of risk. But in any case, the PSTA insurance broker verified that the information provided by Diane Randall was correct. There is no reasonably available insurance for these providers. And also, we have not had any exposure to risk in the past for similar service contracts. So hopefully that will continue on into the future, and we won't have any kind of issue with regard to assuming this risk ourselves. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Okay. Any further? Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you. I would like to know if anyone considered how much, if I call a taxi today and get in it and there's a problem, how much insurance they provide to the general public. What is the difference in cost?
All right. Well, I see Mr. Campos in the audience. It's nice to see you, Nick. Good morning. Do you want to come up to the podium and perhaps you can answer some of these concerns that are being offered? Please identify yourself and give us your address.
Good morning, Commissioner. Thank you. Nick Cambus with Yellow and United Cab here in Pinellas and Pasco counties. We're at 17174 US 19 North in Clearwater, Florida. The exact same limits that you see in the contract today. In fact, we've been providing these services, 125, 250, 50. It's the same limits that we provide to the general public, to the St. Pete Clearwater Airport, to anybody that's transported in any of our fleets, in any of the counties that we operate in.
Patty, do you have a follow-up?
No, I just, and what is in our contract right now? The same?
Correct.
And you're asking to decrease our contract?
No. The 125, 250, 50 is what the state requires, and that's exactly what's in the current contract.
Right, the contract that the PSTA board approved last month was at a higher level, consistent with our care ride contract for our paratransit, but Nick informed us, and we understand that doesn't apply to taxi cab services like he provides anywhere. So now we're coming back to you for an approval of a revised contract that has his contract for taxi cab services at the regular rate that everybody else that he provides for every.
Yeah, we've been doing it for the last couple of years with these programs at this rate.
Okay. All right. Okay. Commissioner, let's see, who's next in the queue? Schulman.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I originally voted against this in the Finance Committee, not because I don't think the levels are appropriate, but I asked for information regarding what are the claims histories, at those levels. So actually, maybe you can speak to that. When there is a claim, whether it be in Pinellas County, if you have state of Florida information, what is the actual, what's the trend, what's the history, what is the actual risk that is faced?
Sure. Well, thank God we've never had a claim above our policy limits. For an insurance company to provide taxi cab insurance in the state of Florida, they have to be part of the FIGA requirements, the Florida Insurance Guaranteed Fund. So we have the policy limits. Of course, the insurance company then has to be part of the Florida Insurance Guaranteed Fund. So in the event that something did breach a policy level, the insurance company is ultimately responsible. But we've never had that. I've been in Pinellas County 35 years, been providing taxi transportation services for over 3 decades, know many of the people on the board here, and thank God we've never had a claim. Certainly, there's plenty of plaintiff attorneys in this area, but we've never had something that breached our policy limits.
Yes.
Yes, and thank you for that. That's, I think, an important context to give, that we're not just changing the level, but we're still maintaining adequate coverage. I understand that the rideshare programs have almost like a when issued policy, right? They're covered up to $1 million when someone's using the vehicle for transit. Is that?
That's right. That Uber and Lyft are different because they only cover when the person is signed on to their app and driving.
From an industry perspective, is there anything like that potentially coming down the road for taxi service to provide that additional coverage?
Well, we hope so. Nothing's out there on the market today. We constantly ask in our renewal policies if there is going to be that type of a policy crafted for our industry, but currently there just isn't that type of a creative policy for us. But certainly that would help us tremendously if our vehicles were not insured at those levels only when somebody was using, we have the same type of an app, or when somebody requests a taxi cab, for those limits to kick in during that time frame, it would help us out tremendously, but that is not available to our industry today.
Okay.
That I'm aware of.
And ultimately, I do think having more providers as part of this program makes sense. It's a good thing for our residents. It's a good thing for the program's viability. So I appreciate your extra thoughts today.
Certainly.
Anyone else?
Yes.
Anyone?
Yes.
Go ahead, Commissioner Cox.
Okay, thank you. In our finance meeting, Mr. Miller, it was mentioned that other local transit authorities like HART do utilize vendors, is that correct? Like cab companies?
Yes.
And what services do they provide for HART, for example?
So we did check with HART and other transit agencies. It's very common for transit agencies to contract with these types of services in their communities too. And these new revised levels of insurance are consistent with what HART provides over in Tampa and some of the other transit agencies.
Right, I was more curious what program it is, if I'm making the question correct. Because this is very limited, as I understand, the amount of trips that are happening and will happen. So I was just curious, the other transit authorities, what exactly are they using a contracted cab?
At HART in Tampa, it's relatively limited as well. Unlike PSTA, they operate their paratransit system with their own employees. They don't have a big contract like we do with Care Ride to provide anywhere number of the trips that we provide, anywhere close. They provide cabs, a cab-like service, mainly out in the suburbs in pretty low numbers.
Okay, so that's with their own employees, so they're covered on insurance, correct?
Yeah.
Okay. And then, as we all know, or if we may not know, our paratransit provider, the DART, which is Care Ride, now their limits are 1 million, 3 million on, it's 1 million, I believe, per person, 3 million aggregate, is that correct? And the reason for that is because that's with a federal contract. I mean, why are their limits so high?
To my knowledge, it's not due to any kind of federal requirement of that. It's just the level that we have assessed in prior years, we put it in the contract, because it's such a large number of vehicles and number of riders, number of trips per day. We can certainly take a look at that the next time that comes out again. I know that the levels that we put in that contract when that was bid out 3 or 4 years ago did limit the number of bidders.
Okay, well, the reason I brought that point up was Mr. Barkley, when we were in our finance meeting, you did mention that you were concerned about the levels of coverage. So I voted yes for this, by the way, so
all right.
I just want a clarification.
Why don't we let our attorney clarify, and then I have a question for Mr. Campos.
Just because the question about the federal funding came up, I just wanted the board to know that there's, in 2 of the programs, in one of the programs, the Sandbox program has federal funding, the TD Lake Shift has state funding, and then the Tarpon Springs Healthy Hop has local grant funding. With all of the grant providers, it's been confirmed that these insurance levels would be acceptable there's no issue with the grant or the receipt of funds from the federal or the state level. So I just wanted the board to be aware of that we did look at the grant requirements and be sure that they did not specify any minimum levels of insurance that would be different from this.
Excellent, thank you. So Mr. Campos, I have a question, if you don't mind. What type of background checks do you do with your drivers?
Sure. Well, first, initially, we do pre-contracting drug testing with all of our drivers. So we do drug testing. We do 7-year background checks on the drivers, as well as 7-year checks not only on their driving history, but then any criminal background checks as well.
Excellent. Thank you.
Sure.
All right. Anyone else today? Anyone? Thank you, Mr. Campos.
Okay, thank
very
you.
much. So now, are we in a posture for voting on this issue? Or I think we do have 2 people who would like to speak to this issue first. And the first one is Mr. Gary Beavers. Good morning.
Straight.
Good morning.
Good morning. Right, my name is Gary Devers. I'm a proficient rider with the Mobility on Demand Sandbox. Hold on, give me a second.
I wondered where that was coming from.
Doesn't want to shut up. I've ridden probably 100 rides this year on Sandbox, and when it first started out, you had to call PSTA to a phone number, and get your trip assigned to you, and driver will show up. They know where you're at by location. Give me a second. It's supposed to be muted. Well, for the first 4 months, I was calling into PSTA to get my trip set up. They charge you $4.50 on your card. And your driver will show up, General United yellow cab, will show up and pick you up. And they come and greet you, help you to the car, because I'm visually impaired, I have a service dog. And most of the drivers that do pick you up were formerly DART drivers, so most of them know what to do, and I knew probably 50% of them. 50% of the time I use CareRide, the other 50% I usually use the Mobility on Demand. One reason is today, like today, we have this meeting today, I don't know what time we're getting out, so I use DART on the way up, I use Mobility on Demand going back. That way I know when I'm going to get out. Now, in the last 6-8 months, I've used the app. I have an app on my phone now, so I can choose, it shows you where you're at on your app. You put in little notes exactly what store you're at or what location you're at, and then you put where you're going. And it will bring up some services. Liberty Cab's one of them if you're a wheelchair rider. Wheelchair Transport and United Cab's one of them. So I'll click on United Cab. It'll search for a driver for you. What comes up on the app is the name of your driver, the tag number, the kind of car he's driving, and how long does it take for him to get to you. And you request it. Very efficient. Gets there pretty lickety-split. The closest driver comes to you. So most of the time I belong to 2 committees in St. Pete. Our committee is the same way. We don't know what time I'm getting out, so I'll catch CareRide on the way up, and I'll catch Mobility on Demand on the way back. So it helps me out a lot as far as that goes. I'm not waiting for a DART trip. DART trip shows up and I got to go. I can just catch the on-demand trip. I do some real estate investing, so most of my stuff is spur-of-the-moment stuff. So I'll get a call from one of my workers, and he'll say, we got a property over there, I want to go look at it. So I'll do my on-demand, and he'll come and get me and take me where I need to go. Like I said, most of the drivers are real efficient and very conscientious, and the spur-of-the-moment thing is the big thing, big benefit. I mean, there's a lot of people that need to go do some shopping. They can just go. And I got something missing out of their refrigerator. They can't just wait till the next day and get CareRide and have to wait till the next day. You can just go. On demand, it's very efficient and very helpful. And they're very conscientious drivers. Most of them are. Haven't had any real issues with it at all. But the app is the biggest thing probably as far as safety goes. You know they're coming. It's on your app. It shows you who guy's meeting with you. Because normally if you call a cab, you don't know who's coming to get you.
Mr. Devers,
yes.
Your time is up. Please wrap up your comments.
Okay, well, I'm pretty much done, but for the most part, the program is working really well.
Thank you.
I make good use of it.
Thank you very much. That's very good to hear, and thank you for coming today.
Thank you.
You're welcome. And next on this issue, we have Gloria Lepic-Corrigan. Good morning. It's nice to see you.
Can't stay away.
Well, it's nice to see you.
Good to see all of you. Hi, I'm Gloria Lepic-Corrigan. I live at 2595 Countryside Boulevard in Clearwater. And I have used the Mobility on Demand program a few times. I think it's a very important part of the total offering that PSTA has for individuals like myself I'm wheelchair dependent. I use fixed route buses. I use the DART program with CareRide as well. But there are occasions when either it's later than the time when normal CareRide service is available, or if there's an emergency where I've needed to use it, and it's a wonderful augmentation to the program. As far as the insurance is concerned, I don't know about insurances. I rely on PSTA, and I rely on the staff of PSTA to make the right assessments. And so I'm in support of what they're recommending today, just because what all of you said is that all the experts have looked at it and said we're covered enough. And so the experiences I've had have been very good in the Mobility on Demand program. So I just wanted to add that.
Thank you very much for your input. It's very much appreciated. Now, board members, we are in a position to ask for a motion, please.
Move approval. Second.
Thank you. It's been moved and seconded. Would you please open the voting card? Everyone, please cast their votes. We have 1, Okay, good. That passes unanimously. Oh, I'm sorry, with one abstention. All right, so our next agenda item is a follow-up to what I thought was a very productive workshop, which you heard me talk about on Friday with Ford Pinellas Board and county commissioners, as well as all our transit agencies. I believe we saw 9 of the 15 PSTA board members there, and so I thank you for your attendance and for participating. You know that it's a really big subject. And Brad, would you like to help introduce this section of our agenda, please?
I would.
Thank you.
So yes, I want to thank the board members that attended that workshop on Friday. PSTA is, as you know, facing a budget deficit in the current fiscal year and looking out into, and as we look out into the future, also in subsequent years, needing to rely on what are right now very healthy reserves to balance the budget, but those are one-time funds, and as they get depleted, we will have to make service reductions. As you know, Heather Sobush, our planning director, has been leading I think a really good planning exercise in looking at all of our routes and services and to make recommendations, hopefully in the future to provide better service in the future, but without additional funds coming for us, I'm afraid that may not be possible, and we'll just have to reduce our level of service. So this is an action item, just sort of a worst-case scenario that the executive committee and the planning committee both have recommended, and the track committee reluctantly have recommended, to authorize staff to start getting public input on service reductions that Heather's going to outline. Not immediately, but later this spring. Heather?
Before I get to the service reduction slide, I'll give a little background for some of our new board members. So about every 5 years, we go through this planning exercise to look at, we survey all of our riders, we look at where they're going to and from, we look for changing patterns in that, we talk to a lot of customers and ask what kind of improvements they would like to see in service, and we analyze a lot of data that we collect regularly. And from this, we develop recommendations on how to potentially improve bus service over the next 5 to 10 years. These recommendations also inform the transit component of Ford Pinellas' long-range transportation plan, which has been branded with us as Advantage Pinellas, which is what you see here. So the concept behind the multiple scenarios of the bus plan is to focus focus resources where transit service does best. So in the kind of more dense corridors where there's a lot of people traveling already, where there's employment, jobs, housing, and this is what other communities around the country have been doing in order to grow ridership. And they combine this with first and last mile services that get people to the core routes, which we already have a program to do that. We just don't have the frequency on our core routes that some of these other communities do. So this can be done one of 2 ways. You can take, which is what we've shown in one of our bus plan scenarios, you can take lower performing routes and you eliminate those routes and reinvest those resources into your higher performing routes. More frequency on those routes would create a lot more trips than, say, increasing frequency on one of those lower performing routes. Or a lot of communities have gotten additional funding through these conversations, and then they've invested those resources into their core networks. So we had developed scenarios that were revenue neutral. That those did include taking resources from lower performing routes and putting them into higher performing routes. The budget forecast now is telling us that it looks like we're going to have less resources, and we were hopeful that we could squeeze more savings out of the budget this year so we wouldn't have to start dipping into reserves. But after the first quarter, it's not looking like that'll be the case. So we are talking about some service cuts now with no new investment in the core network. And then in a few years, we would have to, you can see here in 2022, the reserves start to be depleted, we'd have to make additional cuts. So the one good side of this presentation is that we are really efficient, although I did mention that makes it difficult for us to squeeze even more resources or more dollars out of our existing budget. Over here on the left is Pinellas County Transit Services, and then all these letters at the bottom represent peer transit agencies in our American Bus Benchmarking Group. So we provide about double the service than that agency, all the way over on the right. We also do have limited resources. Among all these communities here, we have the lowest per capita operations spending. 3 of these, Hillsborough, Indianapolis, and Broward, recently passed ballot initiatives, so they'll start increasing their spending on transit and most likely improving those frequencies and investing in premium services. So we developed 3 options, which many of you saw Debbie Leas present at the workshop last Friday. One is, in the case of no additional funding, we would make some service cuts now and then again in a few years, and I'll go through what we're proposing now in just a moment. And then option 2, at about $5 to $15 million per year, the low end, we could pretty much just maintain what we have today, and at the higher end would allow us to maybe invest in a new express route, maybe from the beach to the airport, or to match funding that the DOT is prepared to give us to improve frequencies on our 100X on 275. And then the last option was to really increase our transit service, to have those frequencies of 15 minutes instead of 30 to 60, so that we can start to grow ridership and really provide the service that our community has been asking for a long time. That would cost around $50 to $80 million to do that. Okay, so unfortunately, right now, we don't have any known additional funding, so we are talking about some proposed service cuts. These include paratransit service in parts of the county that we're not required to provide service in. We do, because there used to be bus routes running in those areas, and so when we eliminated those routes, we maintained the service, the paratransit service. That's in the kind of northeast part of St. Petersburg, Shore Acres, and then East Lake, and a few other parts of North County. And then in terms of bus service, I'm going to start at the bottom because the bottom 3 are among our lowest performing routes. One is the Safety Harbor Connector. That operates just pretty much from Countryside Mall through the community of Safety Harbor and back to Countryside Mall. That is only carrying about 2 passengers per revenue hour, so it is down there in terms of performance, but it is the only service to Safety Harbor. Route 58, which is a route that runs from Carillon along Bryan Dairy Road, so our big industrial corridor, over to St. Pete College in Seminole. That's the only direct service to St. Pete College in Seminole. Route 22, which is 22nd Avenue North in St. Petersburg, and then segments of the top 2 routes. So 5th Avenue North, we have a Route 5. So the western portion of that route is lower performing than the eastern portion. So that would be from Grand Central to Tyrone Mall. And then Route 16, the northern portion, is lower performing. And that's on 16th Street in St. Petersburg. So we don't necessarily want to cut all those routes. There are a couple that we have talked about for a long time, but we are starting to go a little bit deeper at this point. We are constantly getting requests from our riders for more frequency, evening and weekend service, for non-riders who would like to see us have more airport service or maybe more frequency on the trolleys. And then a lot of our local jurisdictions, there's a list here of communities that have recently requested additional services, and just unfortunately we're not able to provide it within our current resources. So again, as Brad mentioned, today the action item is to approve staff to go out and start talking to the public about some of these service cuts, and then hold public hearings if we need to do so. And then I'll turn it back to the chair.
Question, Commissioner Barkley.
Yes, thank you, Heather. Great job. I was chairing the planning committee in the absence of our chair last week, and we did discuss at great length Ms. Sobush's presentation, and based on the financial situation that is impending for PSTA, the committee unanimously approved recommendation to begin public hearings on service cuts in order to eliminate the deficit that we are facing going down the road. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Commissioner Eggers.
Just a couple of questions. When you say no additional funding, I'm assuming in that property value increases are already factored in at a certain level. So value increases above that would be considered additional funding?
Yes. Our revenues, yes, are just not increasing as fast as our expenses, or our assumptions about the revenue increases.
Okay. And so in addition to the standard service that we're providing, we're looking across the board at service cuts. That's what, at least we've, I don't mean service cuts, I'm talking about expense, reining expenses in
Yes.
as much as we can. And then the other question is the reserves that you're talking about, does those reserves include money set aside for bus purchasing?
I'll let Brad respond to that question.
Yes, they do. The $18 million that's shown in the current fiscal year reserve level could otherwise be spent on capital like buses.
Okay, so that reserve that we're talking about in 2022, that is all of our reserves, operating, capital, et cetera.
Correct. What is not shown in that reserve total, however, is a board policy. We also have a requirement to retain 2 months of our operating expense equivalent reserve, sort of as a stopgap. So that's not included in that number. And we have an insurance reserve as well. That's not included in that number. So now you know it all.
Okay, and so over that 4 or 5 year period, there is and again, I don't want to get into this discussion today, but there's a bus purchase program in place.
Right.
And so if we have these conversations, it'd be nice to take a look at that again, just to see, what we're doing with our bus purchase program over that 4 or 5 years and what we anticipate. Yeah. One of the things we've talked about, or at least I've talked about, is, the less expensive bus. But what you've been able to bring forward recently is some money from the feds, I guess, that allow us to match dollar for dollar. So it becomes a cheaper bus like we're currently purchasing. So I think as long as you keep finding those opportunities, it continues to make sense. Otherwise, we're eating into those reserves really fast with a purchase of a bus that's twice the cost. I just think we have to keep looking at that. We're looking at all things right now to try to keep us, buying us an additional year or two while the funding issue gets reconciled, I guess. So I'm not going to call it a fiscal cliff. Again, we talked about this 4 or 5 years ago, and then 2 or 3 years ago, but I think we have to just, I think taking services away that that's what we're here for. So I would like to look at other things first before we start talking about cutting services to our riders, unless it's a rider, a route that is maybe got 1 rider on it per hour. I agree with you there, but there are other areas we can look at. Thank you.
All right. Next in the queue is Commissioner Cox.
Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Heather. And I'm looking where we have proposed service cuts in the paratransit service to Shore Acres and North County, and I would take the North County element to be because of the loss of the Safety Harbor connector, okay? Does Route 38 still go out to Shore Acres?
No, Route 38 runs along Beach. Is it
Okay.
Beach? I think it's Beach. And then, but we are proposing that if the Route 16 were to be eliminated, we would reroute the 38 to cover the southern section of Route 16 on 16th Avenue, because that is much more productive. We actually don't get any riders along Beach.
Have we had much blowback from the elimination of Route 38? Have we, public outcry?
Not that I recall. I don't really know when Route 38 was pulled from Shore Acres. It was a number of years ago.
For real?
Yeah.
Okay.
Been at least 7 or 8 years.
For real?
Yeah.
Aye, aye, aye.
All right.
Okay, thank you. That's all I have.
Okay. Commissioner Banter?
Yes, thank you. So I do represent Safety Harbor. So did you describe more? You said there's only 2 riders per hour. Is that how you look at it?
Correct.
And how often does that route run?
Hourly.
Hourly. So literally just average of 2 people on
Between 2 and 3, it's 2 point something.
And
It averages out to.
Countryside Mall and back, pretty much.
Yes. It goes into Safety Harbor, and then up on Philby Parkway, it turns at one point and then goes back out. to Countryside Mall using McMullen Booth.
And that's understandable. That's not a very, profitable route. But like I always say, we need to be mindful whenever we're cutting services to an area of the county, North County, that pays the same millage rate as everybody else, but gets less and less services. We are getting innovative, like we did with the Healthy Hop in Tarpon Springs, that helps bridge that gap. But when we're cutting services, especially in an area that has very limited services, in this case the only service, I think that needs to be some kind of factor we put in before we make that final decision. But thank you for this plan. I think it's very important to have this in place. Thank you.
Thank you.
All right. Commissioner Schulman.
Okay, nope. Okay, I'll just start talking. Thank you, Madam Chair.
You want-
I had a couple of questions regarding, one of the things you said, you talked about our original plan when going from a coverage model to more of a core model was to decrease the underperforming routes so that we could take those resources, reallocate them to high-performing routes to increase ridership, increase usage, right? But under the current plan, because of the budget deficit, we're looking at just reducing coverage and not able to reallocate resources to the higher performing routes.
Yes, that's correct.
So the question I have is, does it make sense at this point to, you made a point, I think, in several meetings ago, where reallocating those resources to increase ridership, increase frequency was good for the overall system. So when we're going through this process of eliminating or getting public hearings going so that we can talk about the process of eliminating these routes, does it make sense to look at any of the other underperforming routes at the same time that we can then reallocate? So we're not just back into this position, 6 months from now, a year from now, saying, okay, well, we still don't have the funds. Now we have to cut routes. We missed an opportunity, I think, to take that money and reinvest, and we're here anyway. So does that make sense at all?
It does. However, I think what the bus plan has really just reconfirmed in all of this effort is that we just don't have the resources to do it without cutting pretty deep. We'd have to cut a lot of 11 routes to meaningfully improve 3 core routes. And, so it's just, then that's going to become very challenging for our community because you're going to start to get into routes that are 10 passengers per hour. The ones I talk about here are 2 to 5. So it just start to be more painful for the community.
But based on the current trajectory, that pain is coming. Okay.
It appears so.
Yeah. Okay. Thank you.
Commissioner Rice.
Thank you, Madam Chair. So for what it's worth, the framework of this board is tasked with making value decisions of whether to go with coverage versus core. And when our goal is coverage, we serve the poor, we serve people with disabilities. And when our goal is coverage, ridership is not a factor because our goal is to serve those most in need. Ridership, I would think, becomes more of a factor when we go to a core framework. So it's just something to keep in mind. When I first hear of routes that maybe only have 2 riders an hour, I think, wow, what a dog of a route. That must be poorly designed, or no offense. There must be something wrong with that route because it's not teaming with a bunch of riders. And there's nothing wrong with the route. It's that just at one point in time, we had the ability, the capacity, and the desire to go with the coverage route, and we didn't want to deny our community the services that they needed. But now, of course, finances, lack thereof, is forcing our hand. So at the workshop last week, on Friday, there were 2 very unambiguous presentations that showed us, just really laid at our feet, that number one, the current gas tax is not sustainable. We could potentially raise the gas tax to get us through the next few years. And the other presentation from the county, or from, I forget who did it now, but the other presentation made very clear that almost every other major county in Florida has raised their gas tax. Pinellas County has not. And also almost every other county commission has supported their transit agency with general funds, and Pinellas County has not. So one of the things that frankly kind of irked me a little bit at the Friday discussion was not amongst us here who are sensitive to PSTA's needs, but sometimes when we were talking about PSTA's needs, it's like we were just talking about another government agency. And when we talk about PSTA's needs, we're talking about community needs. We're talking about the needs of the people that we serve. That right now we would love to get more choice riders, but right now we serve the poor and we serve the disabled. We're at the point where we can't keep running this agency with the funds that we have. So if we want to get serious, if we want to avoid these cuts, if we want to offer the kind of top-notch transit that people deserve, we've got to have grown-up discussions and intellectually honest discussions about the money it takes to support our community's transit needs. Thank you.
Very well said, Commissioner Rice. Thank you very much. Commissioner Eggers?
Thank you. I'm not quite sure where to begin comment. This is obviously not a simple fix. We're talking about specific routes right now, but there is a bigger conversation here. And I think there's been some discussion by some folks about the vision for transportation in this area, the vision for transit in this area, and maybe or maybe not being ready to take that to our residents in a totality, because there's so many different things that transit means to people across Pinellas County. You've touched on some of those, Councilmember Rice, but to others, transit means other things. And if we are going to take the conversation to our residents in the form of any kind of, whether it's a gas tax or increase, or whether it's the incremental increase of gas tax, we don't have that ability to do either, indexing, or whether it's the county providing some general fund dollars or going back for a referendum. The conversation has to be appealing and compelling to people across the board, because when it comes right down to it, we got to vote for it. We got to vote, and we got to get people engaged and excited about transportation and transit. And I would argue that we're not there yet. That we have to do a little better job of that. And again, I'm looking out in the audience right now, and I've had this conversation in the past few weeks with some folks that are a lot smarter than I am about marketing and branding, and how do we go about taking this really exciting, compelling opportunity to our folks in Pinellas County. There's a regional component to it that we're trying to have conversation about on different avenues, and there is different markets that we need to look at, and that's markets are our people, our residents who have different needs for transportation. And so we have a lot of work to do, and it's really, I think we're at a really great spot right now. In some ways depressing that we have to have the conversation we're having, but I think really good spots about stepping up and developing a product that our residents can get excited about. And quite frankly, if you start listening to too much of the stuff, it's just not that compelling. And we got to get out there, and we got to talk to our residents about what they think is important, and really and start developing a product that reflects that. And it is partially to what you said, but it's also it's bigger than that if we're going to make this if we're going to make this really work. So thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Eggers. Commissioner Albritton?
Well, I agree with Mr. Eggers. This is a bigger conversation, and I think Hillsborough did it by getting the private sector and the businesses involved and getting them to be the cheerleaders for it. And that's something that we probably should look at doing here, because not only is it a benefit for the poor and
getting around. It also is a benefit for building our cities and our infrastructure because, you know, the younger generation coming in, they want to have some kind of they want to have a good infrastructure of mobility, and so that affects the businesses. And you know, if we can get them on board with doing it, I think would be a good start on this, where we'd have a better chance than the you know, what we had with Greenlight before.
Thank you. Commissioner Johnson?
Thank you very much. I think we've mentioned county participation in funding, and I cannot tell you how jealous I am of Dunedin. $40 million committed for baseball. Am I right, Janet? Mm-hmm. I would love to see $40 million committed to PSTA, especially to transportation disadvantaged. When you talk about just serving the poor, you're just serving people that are actually transportation disadvantaged. They can't drive for one reason or another. So I'm talking about the people that have to have transportation to survive. And Commissioner Banther, thank you for bringing up North County, because those people that live in North County, a lot of them don't even know, except for your program you just started, they don't know there's transportation available. And in our county, we have a disproportionate amount of transportation, disadvantaged, dependent, added new to that, Janet, people. And serving them means everything in the world. Ross is here. I think many people do not understand. Our TD funds are separate from PSTA funds. And the programs that everybody got up and talked about, first mile, last, you know, the service in the evenings, all of those in our TD funds, a lot of those are going to run out real quick. And we need them. We've proved it. We need it. We need to take care of it. The people that are 2 at a time, I think you said, Heather, 1 or 2 an hour, will probably move over to transportation disadvantaged. But we need to make sure that that program is funded. It's a scary thing. Ross is in the audience, and Ross can tell you how desperate that program is.
Okay.
So, thank you.
Thank you. Commissioner Banter?
Yes, sorry, just one more thing. I just want to thank Commissioner Rice for her comments. I couldn't say it better myself. And the fact that we have to have a very honest look at who we're serving with a very limited amount of funds. And my choice ridership is great, and even better is, like I said, the healthy hop, the different things we're doing for the disadvantaged. That's who we're serving, is the poor and the disabled. I think choice riders and tourism should come second. If we had unlimited funds, of course not. But that was just a very, very great point to make, that we need to have these honest conversations as our funds dwindle about who are we serving, and focus on that. 'Cause I think sometimes it's easy to get lost in some of the glamour of some of the programs we have that look very sexy, but let's be honest, they're not directed towards those that are in the most need. And thank you as well, Commissioner, because Tarpon Springs on the US 19 corridor has some of the most economically depressed seniors in the entire county. So what the efforts we're doing here is very good for that, and those are the citizens that we need to be serving. I would even dare say more so than the ones in Safety Harbor wanting to go to the mall, though I represent them as well, but thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Banter. So if there aren't any more comments, Patty, do you have more comments?
No, it didn't go.
If there are no more comments from my board members, then I just have a few comments that I feel compelled to talk about because I haven't heard them mentioned. And I believe that I agree with a lot of the comments that have been made here about the difficult position that we're in, but we are elected leaders, and it's our job to find solutions. And what I haven't heard, not just here, but on any of the other boards that I sit on that have to do with transportation, public transportation solutions, is where are our collected values? What is it that we really value in our community and our society? Because to Patty's point that she made, it was just the county's portion, the 40 million that you talked about for baseball. There was a lot more money than that going to that effort in Dunedin. Yesterday, we had a conversation on the county commission about the city of Clearwater going forward to redo their facility for the Phillies. And while I totally understand the desire to accommodate these professional baseball teams, it is not lost on me the millions of dollars that their folks are earning and also spending in our community. So I just firmly believe that the time has come to really take an honest look at ourselves about what we value. And, you know, one of the things that I lived through personally, and it's a very heart-wrenching story for me to share, but I've been the primary caregiver of an elderly person up until about 13 years ago for the biggest majority of my adult life. And I know personally from watching my parents and my relatives go through the aging process. Every one of us is going through it. Some of us are a little further along than others, but trust me, if you keep on breathing, you're gonna get there. And I would like you to give some thought to the quality of your life as you go through that aging process. And then a funny little thing happens if you live long enough. You lose your ability to drive that automobile. And when you do, it impacts everything. It impacts your mental health, your emotional health, it impacts your physical health, it impacts your ability to age gracefully in your own home and be able to still interact with your friends, go to your doctor appointments, go to the grocery store. I mean, this is serious business we're talking about here. And I know I get really wrapped around the axle over it, and I'm very passionate about trying to figure this out because we're not stupid people here. But I've been trying to work this out for 50 years in this community, and we are still talking about it. When are we going to start acting and putting our money where we say our mouth is? I'm telling you, I am so over all of this talking and studying and worrying about how we're going to keep this community and the quality of life that we have thus far enjoyed, every one of us. And some of us have little baby grandchildren that we'd like to see them grow up and have the same quality of life. Okay. Thank you for allowing me to say all of that.
Congratulations, Janet.
It's been a little bit of a tough meeting for me today, so.
I applaud you.
I'm going to be
from my heart.
I'm going to be quiet now and get myself back into professional posture I should be in and ask for, are we ready to vote on this? It seems like a long time ago we started the conversation. May I have a motion, please?
Move approval.
Thank you.
Second.
Okay. Please open the voting card. Thank Thank you. Okay. The motion passed. Oh, we picked up a person. We've had 13 votes all morning, and now we have 14. Okay. All right, so our last item today is a follow-up from our last meeting and a request by our beloved FDOT District Secretary, David Gwynn, for a letter supporting his request to secure the funding for the State Road 60 I-275 interchange. I know Forward Pinellas, the county, and the city of St. Petersburg have all sent letters as well. Cassandra, you're on.
Good morning. As your last action item of the meeting, I'm happy to be here. You have in front of you a map and a letter addressed to the Florida Department of Transportation regarding the State Road 60 I-275 interchange in West Shore. Although this project is in Hillsborough County, it does have a significant effect on Pinellas County traffic. We have looked at this particular interchange over the years from a regional perspective and understand that this is the general cause of the traffic impacts on the Howard Franklin Bridge. So even though the department has scheduled the rebuilding of that bridge, the traffic impacts will not subside until they can complete the interchange project. This also impacts our transit service on the 300X, and hopefully one day an option for us to provide service from downtown St. Pete to the airport and then on to downtown Tampa. So without this project, we are unable to provide bus service in an efficient manner to our residents who are working or need to get to Hillsborough County. As Commissioner Long mentioned, the Pinellas County Board of County Commissioners, Forward Pinellas, number of cities in Pinellas County, as well as Hillsborough County and Hart, have all sent letters into the Florida Department of Transportation with the understanding that this is a regional issue that needs to be solved. So the action item in front of you today is to approve a letter of support asking Tallahassee and the Department of Transportation District 7 to advance this project in their work program.
Board members?
Move approval.
Second. All right, very good. Please open the voting card. What? Did we lose people? Okay. All right, Joe's walked out. Okay. I'm sorry?
I'm trying. Yes or no? Yes, please.
Yeah, Barclays out.
Okay. Brad, would you like to update us on reports that are included in our board packet today that we have not yet discussed?
Yes.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone. I will note, in light of the prior discussion with Heather's presentation and some good comments here, the track committee did also express unanimous support for the State Road 60 interchange with some reluctance, with the preference that the $1.5 billion that is going to cost, maybe a little bit of that money could swing over to PSTA and provide better transit over here. Just to note. Thank you, track. In your packet are the performance updates and the contracts. I wanted just to highlight a few things that are coming up on agendas soon. In 2 weeks, we will be taking our first legislative trip to Tallahassee, and I want to thank Commissioners Patty Johnson and Richard Bennett for joining me up for one of the committee weeks in Tallahassee. Again, where we have a legislative agenda for both the state and federal programs, and Our state program is concentrated largely on some of the issues that Commissioner Johnson was mentioning, the transportation disadvantaged, Medicaid, Medicaid brokerage services affecting PSTA, and support for our regional partners in T-BARDA to keep their funding moving. On the federal level, we had a very exciting milestone this past week where we officially hit the 30% design level of our bus rapid transit in St. Petersburg. It was great news, thanks to Abhishek Dayal out there, who is leading the consultants team in that. And of course, we wanted to very excitedly notify our partners at the FTA that we had hit this milestone, but sadly, they are not there. They are shut because of the government shutdown. And so at our committee meetings next month, we're going to be giving a presentation. One of the presentations we'll be giving is on PSTA, the impacts of the federal shutdown on PSTA. The summary is right now we're okay, but the longer this goes on, the more funding that we are laying out for our projects and some buses and other capital items that we will be waiting on FTA to open up again to get reimbursed on. In addition, depending on how long it goes, it will affect the bus rapid transit project, getting approvals from FTA, et cetera. We also will be following up from the Ford Pinellas workshop with some presentations on some hotly discussed items, such as the 5 communities that do not participate in PSTA, and give some further context to that at the committee meetings, what can and cannot be done with those cities. My favorite time of year, my performance evaluation, is next month as well, so you all will be getting that information soon. At next month's board meeting, we will have Abhishek and his designers will be out in the lobby following the February board meeting. We're going to have like a BRT open house out there in the lobby. That's what we're planning on, so that if you're interested in what's going on with the Central Avenue BRT and the design elements of that, there'll be displays and all the information, and you can talk to the folks that know all the details on that. I heard some positive news that we might also have to celebrate next month. Maybe we won some marketing awards. That's, but more to come on that. So that concludes my update.
Thank you. And I have a couple questions, Brad, about the 5 municipalities that do not participate in PSTA. Has the staff done an analysis that shows us what the additional amount of money would be if they were participating?
We have, and that's part of what we're putting together in a comprehensive presentation.
So before we go marching down that road to cut service, I would really like to make sure that we have done everything that we can do, and I know I've asked before to begin setting up appointments with those folks in those different cities. I've talked to a couple of them already, and they are open to the conversation. And I do believe that given we move forward to bring them all on board, it would require an amendment to the local bill that formed us to begin with. But that resolution or proclamation or whatever the heck it was that Senator Jones put in place all those many years ago, that has expired a long time ago. So we should be able to hopefully move that forward. That would be good.
Yeah.
Okay. And when, you didn't give us, when is that trip to Tallahassee that's coming up in 2 weeks?
Well, again, our plan is to go to Tallahassee twice. We have
But I thought I had that on my calendar.
Let's see. Our first trip will be on February 11th and 12th, and then our second trip is during, once the session is actually in session, end of March, or I think.
Okay. All right, are there any more, any other new business items? Commissioner Banther?
Yes, thank you. Was there any follow-up that we could do to the driver that asked about the free rides for the federal workers? Is that even possible? Is that easy to do, or what would that look like?
Well, thank you for bringing that up, because we learned yesterday we have approximately 1,300 families that are deeply affected, and they're members of the Coast Guard, to the point where we have opened food banks and food pantries for them. It's affecting our airport personnel as well at PI. So what's the answer to his question?
It's certainly possible. We've had a lot of discussions about it, and I think we can probably.
It's like they show their ID and they get on free. I mean, would that be a voting item, or how does it work?
Hopefully it could be considered a pilot, since the government hopefully will open up someday. And it wouldn't be forever. But we'll go ahead and promote it and advertise it.
So you can do it on your own. You don't have to have board voting on that. So we can, you can start that immediately with just consensus, correct?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
All right. Anybody else with new business item? Commissioner Eggers, you look.
Are these our closing comments, or are you?
Well, right now I'm on other business, if you have another business. Okay, anybody? Did you have something else, Commissioner Banther?
No, I'm sorry.
Okay. Yes?
At the transit workshop during the panel conversation, the notion of using school transportation and public transportation came up. And that was something that, when I first joined the School Transportation Safety Committee 2 years ago, I was surprised that we couldn't do. Coming from another region of the country where public transportation was used for school students in certain circumstances, it was surprising. Also, last year we had a potential where the legislature was going to change the safe walk zones, which would have increased the need for buses, and then further strained the school's ability to provide that service. So it makes me wonder if, and I realize that there are state requirements that students in most of those circumstances ride a school bus, and there's set standards for what those buses have to have, how they operate. But it would seem to me that we could, in an effort to seek other revenue, provide better service, increase ridership and future ridership for our residents, that we could get a joint workshop with the school board to talk about what a pilot program might look like, maybe for high school students, certainly in our core areas where that service is available, so that we can then potentially go back to the legislature and ask for an exemption or the ability to run a pilot program to see if that would work. Those transportation issues are just going to get worse, and I think it's time to start looking at that. So I'd like to see us move that forward as well.
Thank you, Mr. Schulman. And great minds think alike, because when I had my one-on-one with Representative Sprouse, I actually brought that idea up to him, and he liked it. So this gives me an opportunity to follow up with him now that he's getting into session. And Brad and I are supposed to be going to talk to the superintendent, right, Brad?
Right.
We're working on getting that set up. So more to come on that issue, I venture to say. Patty, Commissioner Johnson?
I commend you for working on that, getting it together. Were you there Friday? And that's why I asked that question. Where's the school board?
Yeah.
They are part of the county, I think. So
It does have potential, because it certainly would not be a precedent. It's been done in a lot of other parts of the country. Maybe not so much for elementary school children, but specifically for high school students. And we already do it for the college. And by the way, you need to follow up with the president, who made all kinds of, had a lot of comments to say about needing more service from PSTA.
There was a representative from St. Pete College at the workshop that I spoke to.
Good,
at length.
good. Okay, Commissioner Cox.
Yes. Thank you. And Mr. Miller, and those of you that are going to Tallahassee in February 11th, I'm truly happy that you will address our Medicaid transportation issue in this county, because It's not good, and people are waiting long times that are very sick people, or the rides are missed, and so on and so forth. And all likelihood, it's because of funding. I'm certain that's where everything comes from. And but please press that for the benefit of a lot of sick people. All right, thank you.
All right, anyone else? Anyone? Yes, Commissioner Rice.
Again, just want to acknowledge and thank our Driver of the Year, Tab. I'm not sure if he's still in the room, but just really proud of our PSTA star employee, all of our employees, but it's just really nice to get a chance to meet and hear from people who really stand out. And also welcome St. Pete Councilmember Gina Driscoll. Welcome to PSTA.
Yeah. Quite an introduction you got today, I'll say. Commissioner Justice, you've been so silent.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
I knew it wouldn't last.
Are we on board comments?
Yes, we are.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just, I was thinking as we were going through, just so that it doesn't go unsaid, I think most of us know this, but the state, we're talking about funding and expenditures that the county has made, that the state has limits on what those dollars can be spent for. And currently, you cannot spend those dollars on some of the items that we've been talking about. And so that is a legislative restriction that we have. I think that's clear to be known.
Maybe you could identify what.
We're talking about spending on baseball facilities. The TDC tax, the bed tax cannot be spent on some of the items that you want to spend them on as in current statute definitions. Just want that on the record so that people know that that's not necessarily a decision between A and B, but what we are limited by the Florida statutes.
And we don't need to have that conversation here, but you do know that they opened that statute up, and what I'm talking about today are transportation solutions that have a direct nexus to tourism. And we can absolutely spend it for that. And I've also had the conversation with Senator Brandes, who opened up that statute and introduced those specific words to get clarification. So stay tuned, please.
We discussed it earlier today, so I thought it would be okay to discuss it, continue today. And also about the county's contribution to transportation, Pinellas. I've been on the commission for 6 years. The PSTA has never come forward with a specific funding request as far as general funding for support. When the PSTA did come forward with a request, it was for charging stations. The county paid $600,000 for those charging stations. So, and as the commission would respond, I think to Commissioner Egger's point, the public will respond to specific requests, specific funding ideas on how we can move transportation forward. And the idea of just more money for transportation is a tough sell for the public as well as for some of the boards. So just wanted to throw those two things in there. When Commissioner Eggers was talking about people being in the audience smarter than him, I noticed several people nodding. I took down their names.
You knew he was going to zing it to us, right?
I'll give you that list later, Commissioner. And then finally, I just wanted to, we all get those emails about some of the constituent issues for PSTA. We had the woman who had the issue at Largo Mall, and I just wanted to commend Mr. Bradford for how quickly and smoothly he handled that. I appreciate how he responded to our constituents.
Thank you so much, Commissioner Justice. I knew you would not disappoint, as always. Commissioner Gerard.
Yeah, we all appreciate Commissioner Justice.
Yes, we do.
Sense of humor and.
Yeah, I was going to say, speak for yourself.
I should say most of us.
Wait, hold on, Pat, hold on just a minute, because for some reason, David's light is on and yours, are we good? Okay, we're good, all right. All you people with lights on, feel free to chime in, because all of a sudden you're all lit up.
No, not yet, actually. And I think I missed the transportation workshop on Friday, but I think we're all in this together and we're all willing to look at all of our sources of income. But yes, I did hear someone talk about transportation disadvantaged in relationship to TDC funds, and that's just not a thing that can be done. I'm certainly in favor of taking some of those funds and looking at what we can do for tourism transportation, which we will be doing next week at our strategic planning session. So
Excellent.
Yes, we have a responsibility too, as does the NPO and several other entities in this county. So.
Excellent. Commissioner Eggers, you had something?
Yeah, well, after Commissioner Justice said that, and made that comment, I'll be watching to see who's nodding their head. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. I always know there's plenty of people smarter than me in the room, so, but I really appreciate a lot of the conversation that we're having today, because it really is, it's important that we have it here. It's important that we have it at the Board of County Commissioners. It's important that we have it at Forward Pinellas, and that we keep having this discussion about what our responsibilities are and how we make this community better. And you spoke eloquently about values, and I think we all have them in different aspects, but essentially we're trying to help others first who can't help themselves, that need that absolutely need us. But I really think we have an opportunity today to look at this near-term, short-term, and mid-term things that we can start doing to make a difference to people at different levels in our economic stratosphere out there, because we do have some immediate needs. We've talked about service cuts. Well, you're right, transit from the TDC is available. There are some dollars that could be available, and you might be able to shake some of those dollars loose sooner rather than later. I've asked Brad and I've asked the PSTA to also start identifying what this $50 to $80 million represents in terms of service, and so people can start to picture what that is in terms of expanded service or creative new service, so that we can start putting a picture behind it, whether it's transportation independence for our seniors. People need to get out and live life. And so there's a lot of things that are cutting across so many parts of our community that sometimes it seems overwhelming as to how we solve the problem. And I do think if we can start looking at it in those terms, we can start maybe getting few things done as we keep having the conversation for bigger and broader accomplishments. But the TDC funding does affect tourism, transportation, and in turn does affect the rest of us who are clogged on the roads. And it does affect those beach communities who aren't participants currently with PSTA. So I think there's a lot of things, a lot of moving pieces here. But I'm glad we're having this opportunity to have that conversation. So thank you.
Thank you for saying all of that so much more calmly than I did.
Yeah.
Mr. Schulman, and you lit up, you want to?
Yes, I'm lit up. First of all, I want to say I appreciate Commissioner Justice, the clarification on funding choices, and that some of it's legislative. I realize that there might be desires to change those, but I think it's helpful for those listening at home or reporting on these meetings to understand that we can't just flip the switch to go from one to the other. There is a process, that needs to go through, and not everyone's aware of that. So I appreciate that. I also wanted to add, as far as the legislative trip to Tallahassee, March 20th is St. Pete Day in Tallahassee, so I don't know if that coordinates with PSTA's schedule to be up there. I also want to make sure I welcome Councilmember Driscoll as well to the board. And also, I wanted to say kudos to Mark O'Hara for his first track committee report. I thought he did a great job, and I appreciate him stepping up into that role. So thank you.
Commissioner Banter?
Came in lit. Thank you. Sorry. Is that it now? Okay, thank you. We're very low tech in Tarpon. I apologize. We don't have these types of things.
All right, don't touch it again. I'll turn it on. There you go.
That's good. Okay, thank you. I just want to say thank you again for the healthy hop. I wasn't here in the previous meeting, but that's been a huge success in Tarpon. I saw many of the staff there for the presentation. I think Brad's getting very accustomed to Tarpon Springs. I think you might he might move there one day when he retires, maybe.
Maybe.
So, no, thank you for that. That makes a huge difference, and it makes me feel like my time on this board, which does end in March, has been a success. So thank you for that. And I also want to say, just please send out, if we can do this thing for the federal workers, just send something out this week. We have like the best advertising team, I think. So something that goes out this week, that until the shutdown ends, that the workers can ride for free. So thank you very much.
Thank you. All right, anyone else for the good of the order? Want to chime in today? No? All right, then thank you, members, for the robust conversation. We are adjourned. See that? So frazzled.
Band-Aid, man, rip it off. Real quick.
Whoever it was who just did this stuff. I thought they would at least let me get settled. I'm so sorry. I'm so
Sorry, the
And I didn't
PSTA
think,
commission.
I didn't think that.
Sure, it's always been welcome.
He just showed all the paperwork and told me I didn't even have a hologram.
You have a few items
I
here
thought I signed it.
Oh, okay. I just wanted to be sure we got that. Perfect.
You're welcome.
Don't leave your bag.
I think so too.
Sandra's been there for, she was on the council before that. So
Don't get me started again.
About something, about CRT, about publishing. So, the mayor's meetings, and I go to the MDO, spend the rest of my life addressing the issue.
Love that. Are we gonna wind up here anyway? Like, should we be looking at, we didn't do this 6 months ago, and now we're here. 6 months from now, are we gonna just, are we missing the opportunity? Like a Band-Aid, right? Do we rip it off and make it pink for a short period of time and then progress to, or do we slowly, so this is dragging on for years? Well, barring alternate funding.
And I told our
They're gonna go.
Yeah, I was asking. I wonder, I don't know. Oranges and.
workshop.
There's always room for
No, nobody gives ever.
It's 40 cents for the. So it's not, so.
Go ahead and.
That's done.
Senator Brandis and
Oh, we're doing this.
Representative Brown and others who, opened up the bed tax. Get some clarifying language, get some clarifying language so that it could be.
Your marketing team showing up.
Get into I don't bore people to death with too many details, I just give people an update.
Raising your hand back there.
Okay, well, Heather was asking me.
I let people know if
If she had, or I guess Whit was asking me.
discussion, feel about it, about this more, do we want to aye.
Because
That I'm gonna wait to hear.
State rep,
So will you work on getting us an appointment with Mike Ryan?
Yeah.
I don't get about what's happening.
Yeah.
And of course,
I gotta run now.
we had
Call me. That's my office number.
Not you guys need
I mean, I don't know about other city councils.
We'd like to think we handle everything.
And don't forget, they send the money
Nice to
down
see you.
for the board that makes it
Yeah. We're trying to put together a map of how many, of all the high schools in Pinellas
Representing
County.
the city and other agencies, we want
Let's go make a presentation
Okay.
to the school board and get it right out there, out in front, in the paper.
Yes.
Exactly.
Okay, I'm gonna,
Yeah.
I've gotta go do a couple
That's just
things.
ridiculous.
No, I don't know.
They missed that.
That
They
what?
can't do that if the school board wants to do
I just like a little heads up on what you put together.
I don't know. I just know.
My dark face.
I don't know if it's Janet or Brad.
So sorry.
But I don't.
I thought it was one of the more interesting PSTA board discussions.
Where you're going to have, so I can start to put.
I haven't heard.
Yeah.
I don't know. Ask Brad would tell. Brad
I'm meeting
knows.
with you for this afternoon at your office.
She's coming with her people.
She's got plans for funding a
solar panel thing.
If it happens, I'll be there, but right now, I don't know about it.
Right, no, I know, she knows that. She's
Talk to
trying to get some money for us.
Commissioner Banther because he's been waiting.
The guy that was
Okay, I will ask.
I just said to Brad, I am getting so out of control.
If you wanted to, I could have my guests on So,
It's a,
if you wanna talk about
years, we're gonna have.
Okay, let me write that down.